Well, let me follow up with that question and work from your end back, which is to have you kind of distinguish a little bit between the business and the social entrepreneur. I mean, when a new business product comes along and breaks through the prevailing wisdom, it's gone, it knocks it out for good. When a new idea for changing the world comes along, that old equilibrium, if you want to call it, is still there, and it tends to come back.
I think that I'm among those who believe that people can be social entrepreneurs who are in the for-profit sector. I see Catherine Reynolds in her past as a social entrepreneur, just as people can be in the nonprofit sector. And it is a question of change for good, and I think people actually can go back and forth. One of our graduates of the social entrepreneurs, our Reynolds Fellows, took the lead at the Harvard Business School in convincing them to have an oath at the end of their experience in business school, an MBA oath, which is now spreading to other universities, to say that as a business person, I'm committed to more than shareholder value. I am committed, I take an oath that I will, as a person in the business community, will commit to the double and triple bottom line. And that is someone who's working for the social good. That's what we want to encourage. And I think that there is room here now for people to go back and forth. There are going to be an increasing number of people who do for-profits who decide to have a nonprofit arm. Or there are going to be people who do a nonprofit that decide to do a profit arm. And they're going to be like the models, the Grameen Bank. The idea of microfinancing caught on as a nonprofit. It's had a contagious impact. And now there are a number of for-profit microfinancing companies that are sprouting up around the world. So this is an artificial barrier between the business sector and the nonprofit sector in terms of doing social good. There are differences, of course, about your business model, and there are other things like that. But I just want to say one other thing before we get too rosy about this. What I've also discovered, and we're learning about it, is just like the civil rights movement, you can have this great sort of sense of surging forward, but there are a lot of pitfalls along the way. There are a lot of policy problems we're running into. The whole idea of now of forming partnerships between social entrepreneurs and the government turns out to have a lot of question marks. And you've been in the middle of that controversy, you know that, on the innovations controversy. This is not easy stuff. And just like it takes a long time to get there, we need to be a lot more thoughtful than we've been to understand what the pathways forward ought to be, what the policies ought to be, what we ought to be doing with tax laws, what we ought to be doing with regulations to encourage and to make it possible for social entrepreneurs to scale up. Because this problem of scaling up is getting to be a very, very significant barrier of progress.
Wayne, from the sort of position of patience, the need for patience, I mean, you've been working the Achievement Academy for how many years now?
Almost 50. But as far as patience
goes, you must have started that when you were what, 5 or 6 years
something
old?
like that.
Yes,
pretty much, yes. I'm in a rut. I've sort of had the same job for a long time. But the thing about social entrepreneurship and anybody who wants to start an enterprise, I find that if everyone tells you that this is the worst idea, this will never work, that this is just ridiculous, then you may actually be onto something. And especially as the more eminent the person is who tells you, is probably more likely that you are actually onto something. And it's just the way life is. And so I find that the young people that we provide fellowships, they're not afraid of making a mistake. They're not afraid of going against conventional wisdom. I know the students at Harvard get pushback. I know that this isn't work that should be done by social entrepreneurs. This should be done by the government. This is government work. What are you interfering with the government for? And we all know how well the government's done with everything. So there is a lot of pushback, but of course that lets us know that we are onto something that could make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Catherine, you want to say a word about what kinds of transferable skills there are across the sectors? I mean, what would you say is the most important skill for us to be looking for developing in our teaching?
Well, I think one of the most important characteristics is someone who has a passion. Mm-hmm. If they don't have a passion for making a difference. And I mean that because, as David and Wayne have said, this is tough work. It's tough work. You're going to get pushed back. You're going to really have to persevere and have that courage to persevere. But also, I think you need to be extremely open to ideas. You have to be bold. You have to be collaborative, because a lot of this does take, while you may have the vision, you usually need others to help you implement that vision. And I think you have to be an out-of-the-box thinker. What you're doing in many ways is sort of breaking down the conventional wisdom. And of all our fellows, I think those characteristics carry through, whether they're in the schools of arts and science, or business schools, or the school, Kennedy School, School of Education. You see those characteristics.
Well, the conventional wisdom maintains itself as the conventional wisdom by fighting back.
Right.
So it's hard to break down, and I think this issue of patience is very important. There's an urgency of change, however, that's like, gee, we got these problems coming on at full speed. How do we aggregate our energy to have these breakthroughs? You seem...
There's no better illustration than what's just been unfolding in front of our eyes today in Washington, D.C. And that is, we have a woman who came out of the social entrepreneurship movement, Michelle Reed. She was Teach for America, then she started her own organization as a social entrepreneur. Joel Klein, who's the chancellor of the schools here, discovered her, became a great fan, and recommended her to be the new chancellor of DC Public Schools when the new mayor was elected 4 years ago. Now, urgency. Boy, she's out there. She has passion, urgency, knock down the barriers, knock down the doors. We've got to do this for the kids. We've been doing too many things for adults. Let's turn this around. Look, we've got the wrong value system in our schools, and let's go forward. And the mayor was going to protect her back, politically. Well, she ran into a buzzsaw with a lot of opposition, a lot of resistance. Teachers' unions signed on to a contract, but then when the mayor was up for re-election, the teachers' unions poured a ton of money into opposing the mayor who appointed her, and he went down. Mayor Fendi went down. And there's been a pushback on her, and now she resigned today. Now, I don't know what she's going to do next. Frankly, I called her before the election, said, there's a seat here at Harvard, we'd love to have you. And I'm sure NYU would love to have you. I don't know if she's engaged to the mayor of Sacramento, and she may go out there, I'm not sure. She's going to do more. But I think it's a classic study in pushback, and how hard this is, to go back to Wayne's point, the forces of the status quo. Well, Machiavelli said it best, that their change is very hard, because the people who believe in the status quo or are benefiting from it are going to always oppose you, and the people who would benefit from it are wary, and they're a little scared of it. And so it's really hard to overcome those forces of resistance, but that's isn't that what makes it exciting? Isn't that what makes you got to push that rock up the hill? That's what makes it worthwhile.
It can't